Welcome everyone. You are listening to the Bleeding Big Blue podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our videos. This podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, Apple, and Google Play. Follow our social media pages at Bleeding Big Blue Podcast. So today we had on former Giants offensive lineman and current Watchung High School head coach Rich Seubert earlier. Before we get to that, here's a schedule update. Tomorrow we will have on Bobby Skinner of Talking Giants. Most likely Friday we'll have on my friend Sean Cacaro and my brother Luca coming on to discuss the NFL schedule, as one is a Steelers fan and one is a Jets fan, so we'll break that down for you in our record predictions. Next Wednesday, we're going to have Rohan Sagani on. He's going to give insight on film and analytics for some of the new Giants in 2020. Next Friday, we're having on Dan Duggan, Giants beat reporter for The Athletic. He'll be on to talk some Giants, and sometime we'll probably have on Helmet Catch podcast host Craig Weirman. Don't want to miss the next 2 weeks. A lot of Big Blue talk, a lot of content, guests. You don't want to miss that. Here's the interview with the former Giants offensive lineman and Super Bowl champion Rich Seubert. And we are now joined by former Giants offensive lineman and Super Bowl 42 champion Rich Seubert. How's everything going, Rich?
We're doing good, man. Just staying healthy. Trying to stay healthy.
All right, I'm going to go to the Twitter questions first. Helmet Catch Pod asks, who was the nastiest lineman on that Super Bowl team, or in practice, or both in practice and a game?
The nastiest lineman on our team, I imagine. I think we're all pretty nasty, right? I think I'd have to go with Snee. You'd probably say me, but I'm gonna go with Chris.
Pretty memorable offensive line. That's why, very very good question. But that offensive line was memorable, and everybody tries to say that, the Giants are trying to mock that now with all the picks they spent on the offensive line and all the money they're doing. Which lineman or teammate did you have the best relationship with?
All of them, right? I think we still all we got a group text message going to this day. Me, Sean, Booth, Snee. We all have kids. We all talk. Cream and I reach out once in a while. We had a pretty special group. We like doing things together. We like playing with each other, and we still like hanging out to this day. So I can't pick one. I got to pick them all. They're my brothers, and we've been through a lot of battles together.
Afro Skinner asked, and he says that he was at the game where you broke your leg and got carted off the field. How tough was the rehab coming back, and when did you get back to 100% health?
I think I'm still waiting to get back to 100%. No, that was a tough one, right? That was 2003 against the Eagles at home. They ran a little Tom game. I got stepped on, shattered my leg. Hospital for 3 weeks. The rehab was pretty long. I just thank God that I had a loving wife and the trainers that I had and the Giants for taking good care of me and taking their time and giving me a chance to come back. I still remember before I was cleared to play, it was Ronnie Barnes and Ernie Accorsi and Coach Coughlin, and I think Dave Gettleman was up there too. And he brought me up into the bubble and put me through a little workout. And, it was tough, but it's a business. I understand that I needed to show that I could play, and I wasn't going to let one injury define me. So my father, taught me never giving up and never quitting. And I just put my mind to it, and I found a way to come back.
It's Super Bowl 42. Everyone remembers the Giants comeback to beat the undefeated Patriots. When you guys were down in that game, who kept you guys in that game mentally with leadership? I know one of them be Strahan.
Sure. Mike. Strahan was definitely a leader of our team. Everybody knows that. Antonio Pierce, and the offensive line, Eli. Everybody. I don't think we're ever down that much, so it was never like we were getting blown out. It was a close game from the get-go, and we just wanted a chance to win a football game, and that's what we had. Our defense played really good. Kept it a low-scoring game, and I think offensively, you just want a chance to win the game at the end. And one of us said, would you rather be down by 3 points or 4 points going into the last drive? And I think with a winning mentality, you'd rather be down by 4 because you got to go for a touchdown to win and not just to go to tie. So we were in that position before. We just played for each other, and the coaches and the players, we all found a way to get it done.
When you were released in July of 2010, a year before the Giants won another Super Bowl, did you look for any other NFL opportunities, or did you just say, you know what, I have to move
No,
on now?
I blew my knee out the last game against Washington. And I was on the train ride coming back from Washington, and that's the year where we beat Washington. If Green Bay loses, we're in the playoffs, and that was when Aaron Rodgers won the Super Bowl. So they came back and beat the Bears. Coming back on that train, I knew I was done. I was getting old. It was the same leg that I broke, and we're going into the lockout season, and all that bad stuff that was going on. And, I rehabbed. I worked hard, but enough's enough. I had a 10-year career. I was happy that I would never want to play for another organization. So once a Giant, always a Giant, and like Eli said, only a Giant. There's something special about saying that, where you played for one team your entire career. You never put on somebody else's uniform. I never wanted to put on somebody else's uniform, and I'm a Giants fan. My kids, my family are Giants fans, and I enjoy going to the games, cheering on the Giants. No matter how good or bad they are, and they'll get better. I'm excited for this year. I think we all are pretty excited for something to happen this year.
Definitely.
But I like what Dave Gettleman's doing, and I'm excited for the new coach. Coach Judge. I got a chance to meet him, and he seems like he's an intense guy, and he's going to find a way to right that ship. And I'm just excited. It can be bad for so long, and then the tide's got to change. So I'm looking forward to big things from those guys, and looking forward to Daniel Jones getting his chance, and Barkley and the new offensive line, like you said. It's going to be different.
A lot of people have been drawing comparisons to Coughlin's first press conference and Judge's first press conference because he was tough. He laid down the law basically, even though he didn't mention any players. He laid down the law. Do you see that comparison between the two? I mean, you played under Coughlin.
Yeah, sure. I played for Coach Coughlin. I love Coach Coughlin. I was at that press conference when Judge first came to New York, and you can see it. You can see the intensity and the desire to win and the want. He's not gonna. I think the biggest thing I took from there is don't tell me what a person can't do. Tell me what he can do, and we're gonna make the most of him. I think that's what every good coach needs to do. I don't think. I coach high school football.
Yep.
And we don't have a draft. We get kids, and I love the kids I coach to death. And you have to find what they're best at and put them in the right position to succeed. And I don't care what level it is, and the NFL, college, or high school for that matter. Coaching is making men do what they don't want to do to become better. And I think that's what he's going to do. And I'm excited to watch him coach.
Were you at Eli's retirement press conference in January?
I was. I wouldn't miss that for the world. Eli's my guy. I'm a big fan of Eli. One of my friends, and I always wish nothing but the best for that guy.
Watching the NFL the last couple of years, many scouts and analysts have said that offensive line talent is deteriorating from transition from college to the NFL in the last couple of years. The Giants may have had a hint of that when Eric Flowers was their 9th overall pick in 2015. Do you agree with that statement that talent is deteriorating on the offensive line from when the transition is made?
That could be true. I've been game for a long time now, forever. I think it all comes out time we can spend the off season together. Whatever my whole career. The off seasons were more intensive, and we did a lot of drill work, and we had Jim McNally repeat March until camp started. So we got a lot of work done in the off season. Once the season starts, it's time to polish your skill, not to learn new skills. College coaches, I think they're just trying to win. I don't know if all of them are really coaching that much technique. I think they're just trying to, get the job done and X to Y and run the play. And playing in the NFL takes good technique. And I was blessed to have two really good line coaches, with McNally and Coach Flaherty. Those guys made me. Both of those coaches, I'm glad I had them. They got the job done, and they taught me how to do it. I wasn't the biggest guy in the world. Played at 6'3", 307, 305, which is below average probably for the NFL. But a little harder. I think athletic ability, they can be great players, but I think the work they put in will make them, superb. But it's a different generation. My generation, we worked for what we got. These guys sometimes, I don't think they work as hard as we used to.
When Will Hernandez was the 34th pick out of UTEP in 2018, a lot of people seem to compare him to Chris C. Do you see that in him a little bit? With the aggressiveness?
I don't think I watched him enough to make the comparison. Chris is my guy. Played with him. Played next to him only a few times. Right, when I was playing center for Sean Hurd. He was a special player. I think it's not fair to judge anybody to Chris. He was, in my mind, he's an all-pro, and that's a tough comparison to make for anybody, let alone somebody that plays for the Giants. But he could be. He needs to work his butt off, and Chris played. What did he play? 10 years, right?
Something like that.
Yeah, time will tell. Time will tell.
What was the feeling in the last 1 minute 45, 1 minute 30 seconds of Super Bowl 42? Obviously, you had the helmet catch, and then you had the game-winning touchdown, and then
scored too quick.
The end of the game.
I think everybody's back in their minds is we scored too quick. They still had Tom Brady and Randy Moss. They still had time on the clock, and they only needed a field goal to tie us. But it's pretty special. That game went so fast. Super Bowl 42. It was my first and my only one. And you blinked and the game was over. It seemed like, and you look back at it now, and I had the opportunity to watch it, the TV copy with my family that aired during the quarantine. And it was fun. It was fun to watch it again. It might have been the first time I watched the TV copy and watch all the plays and what they were saying about us and what they were saying about that. It was a heck of a football game. Like I said, you just want a chance to be in it at the end to win it, and we found a way to get it done.
Now, do you know the story about the football with David Tyree and Plaxico?
I do not, unless you tell me, fill me in on the story.
Well, according to one of the broadcasters I interviewed, Alan Hahn from 98.7 ESPN, he says that Plaxico obviously has the ball in which the game-winning touchdown was scored, but David Tyree still wants it because of the helmet catch. And I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. You gotta go steal it, David, right? I never heard that story. I figured that would have been a different ball. How could it be the same ball, right? The way they throw balls in and out. But that's cool. They gotta play a little game where if you come over to the guy's house, you find it, take it. We did the same thing with the SB trophy. It was me, Sean, and Chris when we that year. We all got to go to the SBs, which was pretty cool, and the team won one of them, and Sean had it at the party afterwards. And then we played rock, paper, scissors for it, and Sean won. But I know where it's at in Sean's house, and if I ever meet there, I'm going to try to take it back. But it's funny how little stories like that live on forever.
Now, obviously, as we brought up before, the Giants drafted heavy on the offensive line. They look good for the future right now with a lot of depth. Now, how many years do you think with the right chemistry does it take an offensive line to gel?
I think it takes a few, 2 years, 3 years. I think it takes a lot of reps and repetitions, and obviously, what's going on now, who knows when they're going to be able to start, which is going to hurt those guys because they're young. They need to get together. They need to start doing everything together, from eating breakfast, eating lunch, hanging out, going out at night, going out to dinner, practicing, obviously, watching film. They need to get with the quarterback. The more they can do together, the better off they'll be, and the faster the process will go. I think what made us a good group, a special group, was, like I just said, we did all that stuff together all the time, and we enjoyed each other. And I think liking the guy you play next to goes a long ways. That room's got to be pretty tight, and it doesn't matter what happens, you have each other's backs. And the more time we spend together, that bond will happen. So, my advice would just be, whenever you can, get together and start being buddies.
Two more questions. What do you think of this narrative that has been going out the last couple of years, ever since Eli's been slowing down in his career, and obviously he retired in January? What do you think of the narrative that people are trying to put out there that the defense carried him when they're talking about whether Eli should go in the Hall of Fame or not?
Eli's a Hall of Fame quarterback. I know I'm biased, and I played with him, and he is my quarterback. But he's 2-time Super Bowl champ and two-time Super Bowl MVP. And I think you were judged by what happens at the end of the season. Not, Eli's the man. Football's a team sport, saying that, right? So you're only as good as the pieces around you. Offenses feed off defenses, and defenses feed off offenses, and special teams will help you win games. I think Eli's the ultimate team player. I don't know what else to say about him. He's a great teammate, and he won us some football games. So I'm happy he was my quarterback, and we get to play him twice a year.
I asked former Giants defensive tackle Stacy Dillard about this as well, because he's also a high school football coach. How is it developing high school players and getting them ready for the college, the ones that are trying to go to college for college football?
I love it. I just love coaching the high school kids. I think it's enjoyable to me. It keeps me involved with the football game. And, I get to coach at Watchung Hills, the Warriors down here in Warren, New Jersey. So I enjoy it. We have a handful of kids that really want to play in college, and it's fun to talk to the college coaches. It's fun to talk about the student athletes, and that's the biggest thing, right? Is making sure they're doing good in the classroom, and the level they can play at, the next level is dictating a lot of things sometimes that they can't control, right? Size, speed. Speed you can work on, but the size is what kind of getting you. So I love pushing these guys. I love telling my stories.
Do you think the high school football players admire you maybe more than they would a regular coach, or admire you admire this level the same because you have been in the NFL for so long and you won a Super Bowl?
I just hope kids admire all their coaches and all the coaches that have the same opinion that I have, is that we're trying to create these men. Wins and losses come year to year. But building these young men is every day. I look up to my coaches my entire life, and I still think back to moments that I have now coaching, and what would Coach Schultz do, or what Coach Passy do, my high school coaches, how would they handle these situations. I've called my Coach Passy a few times. He was my coach my junior and senior year in high school, and asked him for advice. I think you never stop learning, and every day I learn something new. So hopefully these kids do the same thing, and they enjoy it. The bottom line is, if you don't love the game of football, how can you play it? This is the most. It's a tough sport to play, and if you don't, this especially now, right? I keep going back to what's happening in today's, like right now in America and everywhere else. Those that are working and working out somehow, some way, they want to be good, and you just want to coach the kids that want to work hard and that want to be successful in life, and it's fun to put a smile on your face.
Rich, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for coming on.
No, thanks, man. Stay healthy, all right, man?
Yep, you too. Alright, so after this interview, I wrote down some things, and I wanted to analyze them and take away from this interview. I usually don't analyze interviews or take away from them, but there's a lot to learn in this short interview I did with Rich Seubert. First one, draft an O-line. It took Gettleman 3 years in this current regime to draft an offensive line. You saw Will Hernandez get drafted in 2018. He was kind of a put-in guy, a guy you could use right away. Not really a guy you have to develop, but a guy you could put in right away. He's started 32 of the 32 games he's played ever since he's been a Giant, 2018, 2019. He did drop off in production last year, but that's for another episode. Giants spent 3 picks on offensive line this year, and they keep getting undrafted free agents, Nick Gates being one of them from 2018, not making his debut till 2019 because of an injury, and he got put on IR. But the point is, draft an O-line for a long-term answer, because that's the way teams are doing it this decade and this generation. It's not building through free agency anymore. You saw what happened to the Giants' defense in 2016. They were one of the best in the league, one of the best scoring defenses in the league. Olivier Vernon, Damon Harrison, and Janoris Jenkins. All guys that were added in free agency. All guys that were gotten rid of by Dave Gettleman. Now, you could say that you didn't agree with them because there were different circumstances to why each was traded. Vernon having the most downside, I would say, in a way, because he was injured, most of the time, and he was really inconsistent with his pass rush. Now, going back to Jenkins and Snacks Harrison, those were different. One got traded for a fifth, and Jenkins was released after an insensitive tweet last year, which left the secondary without a veteran. My point is, those options in free agency did not work. And you've seen Dave Gettleman finally decide, you know what, we're going to build through the draft. He got Matt Pert, a developmental right tackle, who's going to be a bit of a project. We're going to have to sit there and develop him. And, he's not so good at getting off of his hips so good with speed. But that's something you could fix when you go to the NFL, because you're going to have guys like Yannick Ngakoue and Jadeveon Clowney what he's going to face. But the point is, even if you develop a guy for the first 2 years and he steps on the field barely, you're still getting a long-term answer if you have the right coaching staff. They tried doing that with the 2015, 2016, 2017 offensive line. Only, I believe, one person was added through free agency, and that was John Jerry, the right guard. Flowers was drafted, Pugh was drafted, Richburg was drafted, and Bobby Hart was drafted. That was the starting offensive line. Obviously, that didn't work because Hart didn't know how to block, Pugh couldn't stay on the field, Richburg couldn't stay on the field, and Eric Flowers was just a turnstile. But in the thing of this, you do get Andrew Thomas at left tackle, and he's going to start at left tackle sometime during the season, where they place him at right tackle just to start, even though he's more of a force at left tackle. It depends, because right tackle is the weaker tackle. Do you really want Nate Solder facing more and the better edge rushers at the left side and struggling again like he did last year? Or do you want him on the weaker side where you're going to face weaker pass rushers and you want Thomas going through those struggles? Personally, I've thought about it. I would say that Thomas is better to put at left tackle because you're developing him for the long term. And if you put him at right tackle, you're going to have to switch him to left tackle and have him go through his footwork again. And that's very different when you get to the NFL. Now, Pert and Lemieux, both guys that you need to develop. Lemieux probably going to center, probably going to guard. And as I mentioned, you have Matt Pert, who's going to be playing right tackle in the next few years or the next couple of games in the season. You could probably throw him in at the end of the season because, I don't know, the Giants are not making the playoffs, and everybody knows that. Honest stance right now. I'm not saying that they don't have hope, but this team is not ready to compete yet. They need at least one more year to set everything straight and to get their playmakers to develop their secondary and develop their pass rush, because their pass rush is at nothing right now. So my first takeaway from this interview would be, if you're a team that needs a long-term option along the offensive line, and if you're having problems, yes, I get it, the last couple of years, the offensive line talent has been deteriorating from the transition from college to the NFL. But if you're an offensive line coach in the NFL, you would want to get these players ready for the long term. You want to be able to use them. You don't want short-term answers that you're going to keep signing to contracts and contracts and contracts and wasting money possibly on a waste. You want somebody long-term who could develop into that franchise offensive lineman that you want. You don't want short-term answers. You don't want a guy for 1 to 2 years and then go, bye. You don't want to do that. That's why Dave Gettleman pulled his head out of his ass this year and decided, okay, let's take 3 out of 10 picks on offensive line. They picked Thomas, they picked Lemieux, and they picked Pert. Yes, as I explained it before, it might take a little bit for Lemieux and Matt Pert to adjust to the NFL. Bigger defensive tackles, speedier edge rushers. That's what you're going to get in the NFL, and if you develop these guys correctly, you'll get that. So the Jerry Reese thing of signing offensive tackles and signing short-term options doesn't work. Dave Gettleman learned that a little bit into his regime with the New York Giants. Obviously, he was here before, but I'm talking about the GM regime. So obviously, draft an offensive line. That's how teams win these days. That goes with really any position. Like, if you just need like a tack-on pass rusher, you could either actually take time to draft that, or you could just add one in free agency if you're a step away from winning. But if you're looking for the long-term option, you need to draft that player. That's one of the lessons to take out of this. The second lesson is chemistry. For the people who heard the interview and heard Rich say, we used to go out to dinner, we used to do all this stuff with each other. That was him, Kareem McKenzie, David Deal, Chris Snee, and Sean O'Hara. That is chemistry. That's going out to dinner. And I'm not saying that you have to be somebody's best man. It doesn't have to get like that. But you need to develop chemistry, and you need to know your other offensive linemen so you work better. It makes it 1,000 times easier when you're trying to gel. That's what this offensive line needs, and that's what a lot of people forget in this league. That you don't just build an offensive line, they gel automatically. No. You could draft an offensive line. They don't gel automatically. Why? Because they don't know each other. They have to get to know each other and work well with each other in a group side by side. Go out to dinner. Do something. Have a drink on a Friday night or something. I don't know. But the point is that I think a lot of offensive lines lack chemistry. And this is not something we've heard of. The old-fashioned way was go out to dinner. Now I don't know if you really do that for offensive linemen. I don't know if offensive linemen do that these days. I could be wrong. But a lot of players don't know how to gel their positions these days. Whether it be offensive line, the secondary, or the defensive line. Gelling your position is one of the keys to having a successful football team and being a successful player. And that's something the league has missed over the years for certain teams at certain positions. That's why this is a lesson to learn from. If you learn from Sean O'Hara, he'll tell you, or Rich will tell you, they used to go out to dinner, they used to do everything together. That's why they worked so well. I'm not saying that they were the best offensive line in football, but they were one of the best because they knew each other and they know who they were, and they worked well together because they knew how each other worked and knew how each other did everything. That's what teams forget. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our podcasts are available on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play, and also on YouTube. Follow our Instagram and Twitter pages at Bleeding Big Blue Podcast. Join us tomorrow when Bobby Skinner of Talking Giants comes on. Friday, Sean and Luca will come on to discuss their schedule predictions for the schedule that is coming out this Thursday around 8 o'clock, but obviously you'll have the leaks. Next week we have Dan Duggan of The Athletic on next Friday, and one of my friends over Twitter is joining us next Wednesday to discuss his view on analytics and film. He's going to show us some film probably and his analyzations on the newer New York Giants, and we see how they played from a microscope from other teams. Thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you tomorrow.